Time for another edition of Presbyter Chat, where your questions are answered through the prism of pre-Nicene Christianity. Now your host, Presbyter Darren Kelama.
Thanks for joining us. Today's question is a little long, so I'll read through it to make sure we get all the subtext and nuance. It begins, "Hi Darren, I'm really trying to understand why Jesus sent two people in two directions. It's almost like he tasked Paul to build a religion for Gentiles and Peter to rebuild the religion for Jews, but leave it Jewish at the core. He said he was going to found his church on Peter, and Peter was a Judaizer. So why shouldn't I consider that the true religion of Jesus was Peter's and Paul was the deviant? Why not one religion for all? If he was wrong about Peter, that raises serious questions about his wisdom. As I said, I'm not trying to be confrontational. I'm trying to be honest and find out, am I just confused? Am I missing something? My brain tells me a lot of things just don't add up, and when things don't add up, you're either missing pieces or you're dealing with a false system. Thanks, Mike." Okay, Mike. Well, I guess the easy questions can wait until next week because you just decided to unload the whole cargo ship on me with this one. And yet, once again, we find that what appears to be a jumbled collection of theological chaos, like we just read, is easily sorted out when we compare the original scripture found in the first Christian Bible of 144 AD to the edited and annotated version that we know today as the King James Bible, which was itself spawned from the Latin Vulgate of 382 AD. And without the original, this exercise is pointless and will lead to a spiritual dead end. So if you're new, please pause the episode and download the free ebook version at theveryfirstbible.org. Okay, now that we're all settled in, I should also mention that to make sure everything is addressed and accounted for in this episode, I brought in Chancellor A.W. Mitchell from the Marcionite Christian Church to assist with the answer. The subject of Peter and his role is a very important one, and segments of this episode will be used in training future presbyters, so we need to be on point. First and foremost, let's start with a verse that both the original Bible and the King James Bible both agree on. This verse works very nicely as it helps frame the question and the forthcoming answer, while at the same time establishing the core roles of both Peter and Paul as it relates to establishing the church, giving us the 30,000-foot view, if you will. And again, you can find this passage in any Bible, not just the original. In fact, both Bibles are in agreement on Galatians Chapter 2, which is where it's derived. And here it is, Galatians Chapter 2, verse 7, quote,
James and Cephas and John, those reputed to be pillars, the right hands of fellowship they gave to me and Barnabas, that we should go unto the nations, but they unto the circumcision.
Unquote. And by the way, Cephas is Peter, so don't get too hung up on that. Now, this verse isn't mincing words, is it? It's straight out telling you that Peter, James, and John would be preaching to Jews, and that Paul would preach to us, the rest of the world. Now, am I missing something here? Is there some smoky nuance or mysterious subtext that only the apologetics industry can decipher and that normal people are incapable of understanding? No, I don't think so. Here, let's read it again, though, to be sure.
James and Cephas and John, those reputed to be pillars, the right hands of fellowship they gave to me and Barnabas, that we should go unto the nations, but they unto the circumcision.
Well, it's plain as day. Even a TV preacher or a golden retriever can understand it. Peter preached to Jews, Paul preached to us. They were preaching two completely different gospels. More on that later. And by the way, as this event was happening, where was Peter? Oh, that's right. He lived in Jerusalem talking to Jews in synagogues. And where was Paul? Yes, traveling throughout the Roman Empire and establishing Christian churches while talking to us, each doing exactly as we would expect after reading Galatians 2:7. You see how easy that was? Everything lines up. This story fits. And what else can we glean from Galatians chapter 2? Well, the backstory is almost unbelievable, yet here it is in black and white in both Bibles. Paul takes his traveling companion Titus with him to visit Peter and the rest of the Judaizers at their lair in Jerusalem, and the first thing they want to do is circumcise Titus, chop off his foreskin in some barbaric sacrificial ritual practiced by an alien religion, and then turn both of them into Jews. Now, Paul then goes on to describe them in less than flattering terms as false brethren, and then says, quote, such a person God does not accept, unquote. And by the way, where's the church in Jerusalem when Paul comes to visit Peter? No mass, no worship, no church. Peter has done nothing to establish the church, but he sure seems to spend a lot of time around Jews trying to circumcise Christians. Now remember, after this confrontation in which Peter and the other Judaizers are forced to put down their knives, they agree that Paul should preach his gospel to the world and that they will stay amongst the Jews in Jerusalem. Why was Peter so happy with this arrangement? Well, we're going to learn the answer to that in just a little bit. And again, this story is in every Bible. Now, shortly after this incident, again, right there in chapter 2 Galatians, James comes from Jerusalem to visit Paul at his church in Antioch, which is today called Antakya. It's on the extreme southern edge of present-day Turkey, near the Syrian border. Now, bear in mind, it's not like James just dropped by from down the block to say hi and watch the game. We're talking about a treacherous journey of over 300 miles that would have taken over 2 weeks even under ideal conditions. It'd be like walking from Chicago to Des Moines, Iowa. And from what we read, Paul, James, and the other Christians are getting along just fine after he arrives, passing the time, praying, and sharing meals together. But what prompted James to leave Jerusalem and the Jews to make this journey and be among Paul and the other Christians? Perhaps there was a falling out with Peter and the Jews of some kind. Well, we can only wonder. But what we do know is that not long after James arrives to Paul's church, guess who shows up? Yeah, Peter and more Jews. Now, were they carrying knives? Were they looking to circumcise more Christians? Again, we don't know. But a fight soon broke out, and James stopped socializing with the other Christians on command from Peter, who said they were unclean, while at the same time, Peter was busy also trying to talk Barnabas out of even being a Christian. In short, Peter and the Jews are causing chaos, much like the Judaizers of today, undermining the faith with word games and linguistic parlor tricks as they try and substitute God our Father with their Yahweh deity and alien religion, bullying their way into Christian churches and trying to take over. These people are no different than hijackers. And by the way, this wasn't a one-time event. These Judaizers visited and attempted to undermine every church established by Paul throughout the Roman Empire. I'll have a link to the prologues of the epistles in the show notes that describes their activities.
In part 2 of this episode, we explore the final showdown between Peter and Paul at Antioch and dissect the verse written by a single anonymous gospel author which purports to give the keys of heaven to Peter. And a reminder that this episode relies solely on the scripture presented by 2 Bibles. And we encourage you to read Galatians Chapter 2 in full to prepare for part 2 of this episode next week on Presbyter Chat.